In Unit 7, we will discuss listening strategies. Listening is a critical skill for students to develop in order to access core content and engage in lessons. Academic listening skills can often be overlooked or misunderstood. This brings us back to the important distinction between conversational English and academic English, which is especially important for long-term English language learners who may have excellent conversational English skills but still be developing academic English skills, including for listening. In this unit, we'll focus on two concepts: scaffolding strategies to ensure that students are able to access the content during tasks that involve listening, and second, processing strategies and checks for understanding to make sure students have actually understood the content. Specifically, we'll look at 3 different classroom situations when listening is required: instructions and directions, secondly, lectures and direct instruction, and finally, videos. We'll begin with some tips for giving instructions and directions. The first tip is to provide a written copy of steps and directions along with oral explanations. This way, students are able to listen to the instructions at the same time that they are reading it. Leaving the steps or directions posted or accessible while students work allows them to go back and check to make sure they are following the correct sequence. This is especially important when students are working on multi-step projects or activities like a lab in science class. Chunking complicated directions into sections or stages can also be very helpful. Using a checklist or simply a numbered list allows students to understand and identify exactly what they need to do. Modeling steps and processes as you explain is also helpful, as students are able to see what they need to do. Similarly, providing exemplars of final products allows students to know where they are headed, and sometimes this is all they need to get started. Repeating and rephrasing instructions, of course, is also helpful in many situations. Another option for this is to have a student repeat or rephrase the instructions in kid-friendly language. And if you're working with students who are newcomers or beginning level English language learners, and you have bilingual students, it can be very helpful to have a student repeat or rephrase instructions in the student's native language to ensure they know exactly what to do. Checking in with students individually to ensure understanding is also important. Many students who may not be comfortable asking a question in front of the whole class are much more comfortable talking one-on-one with the teacher to clarify any doubts or questions. Our second set of tips is listening strategies connected to lectures and direct instruction. The first tip is to be sure to establish a purpose and a focus. This helps students to sort information and allows them to identify main ideas and important information and distinguish it from less important details. Secondly, emphasizing relevance and making connections provides a context for students to complete as they complete the tasks. Connections can be to previous lessons or connections to real-life applications. Providing visual support is essential. This can be in the form of realia, which is actual objects that students can see, and of course, pictures, charts, and maps. Providing visual support also increases engagement. If students are expected to take notes, providing a skeleton outline or guided notes can be very helpful for English language learners. Here's an example of a skeleton outline for our lecture in science. The lecture is on animal classifications, and subtopics are provided to help students understand the key ideas, and the sentence frames allow students to be sure to record the essential ideas. As students' listening skills improve, skeleton outlines or guided notes can become less and less detailed as students become more independent during listening tasks. Explicitly teaching and practicing note-taking skills is another helpful tip. Here is an example of 2-column notes, a very simple way to help students organize information. On the left, students record the topics, and on the right, important details. Providing the topics and possibly sentence stems on the right is a way to provide additional scaffolding for beginning level English language learners. And again, as students' listening skills improve and note-taking skills include, they'll need less and less scaffolding. Explicitly teaching, modeling, and practicing identifying main ideas is an important skill for students to develop as well. Another helpful tip for lectures and direct instruction is to divide lectures into shorter chunks and provide opportunities for students to process the information. For example, if there is going to be a 30-minute lecture, taking that lecture and dividing it into 3 10-minute sections with an opportunity to process at midpoints through the lecture will increase students' understanding, engagement, and retention. Including comprehension checks and accountability measures will help students to focus and to not tune out during the lecture. Here are some examples of comprehension checks and processing activities that can be used either during or after a lecture. First, a turn and talk, a partner discussion, perhaps where students identify 3 main ideas, 2 questions, and 1 opinion. Students can record main ideas in a chart. Padlet is a great online tool for students to record main ideas as a group. Just giving students 2 minutes to write a written summary of what they've learned so far on a post-it or a paper is a way to make sure students are focused and held accountable for listening during a lecture. Similarly, students can do an illustration or create some sort of visual image to represent the content of the lesson. And again, this can be a very quick 2-minute activity to ensure students are focused and engaged. Pear Deck is a great way to insert interactive slides in a lecture presentation. And games like Kahoot is a great way to ensure, or to use as a formative check to see what students have understood after a lecture. The key is for students to be engaged learners and not just passively nodding. Next, we'll talk about tips for videos. In many ways, the tips for videos are similar to the tips for lectures and instructions. It is important to note that there is a misconception that videos are an easy way for English language learners to access content. And while the visual content is a positive, the language in videos can sometimes be very complex and confusing. And with so much input, it can be difficult for students to identify main ideas from extra information. So again, establishing a clear purpose and focus before the video is essential. Providing a skeleton outline or guided notes helps students to identify key topics and important ideas. Again, explicitly teaching and practicing note-taking skills can help them become more independent. Explicitly teaching, modeling, and practice identifying main ideas will also allow students to identify key ideas during videos. Dividing the video into shorter chunks with opportunities to process, and including comprehension checks or accountability measures will also ensure that students are focused and engaged with the content. A couple of strategies that are specific to videos. Simply turning on the English subtitles can help English language learners understand the content of the video more. And using web tools to embed questions or discussion prompts and mini quizzes into the videos is a great way to provide formative checks for understanding. Google Forms, Edpuzzle, Vialogs, and Blubber are great tools for doing this. Blended learning structures can be a very effective way for students to access content in videos. In this case, students watch the videos on individual devices in the classroom. This format allows for increased differentiation opportunities. For example, newcomers might first watch a video in their native language and then watch a video in English. Students can also decide to display the subtitles in English and in some cases in their native language as they watch, and they can stop, pause, or rewatch the video as many times as needed. Students who process information quickly through the videos are able to pursue extension activities such as additional videos or links to explore or additional tasks. Once again, the key is that the students are engaged learners who are interacting actively with the lesson content. One additional strategy that can be effective in reviewing content and applying vocabulary is a closed listening activity, and this can be used in all different content areas. Closed listening activities are a great way to reinforce academic vocabulary and complex content. They provide a focus on key ideas and concepts. Basically, in the closed listening activity, students will listen to a passage and fill in the missing words. This can be done either on paper or in electronic format. Here's an example from science. These can be a great warm-up to help students refocus on the content for the day and make a connection to what they learned the day before. In this case, this is a listening close related to earthquakes. So the teacher would read the passage aloud. Students are listening and completing the blanks with the key academic vocabulary. A variation of this would be to have students create the passages themselves. It could be made more difficult by erasing the word bank. It could become more interactive if students are working in pairs and read the passage to a partner or in small groups. And it can be easily paired with speaking activities. After completing the listening close, students can be prompted to retell or summarize the content using sentence stems. It's time for our assignment for the Listening Strategies unit. Once again, it is a classroom application and discussion post. Please implement a listening strategy to provide scaffolding for either instructions, a lecture, direct instruction, or a video in one of your classes. Then add a discussion post that includes a description of the class, including the grade, subject, and types of learners, a brief discussion of the focus of the lesson, a description of the strategy implemented and the rationale behind it, and then a discussion of the results. How did it go? What were the successes? What were the challenges? Did you have any problems or surprises? And finally, reflections. Would you use the strategy again? Why or why not? And what would you change?